Hey,
Hey Alex, how are you?
good. How is everything?
Not bad, not bad. How have you been? How are you catching up since Manchester?
Yeah, I've been okay. Manchester was a bit maybe stressful because I had to come from London, as you know,
Mm.
and then there's a lot of training activities to do still, and I'm already thinking about the exams, so it's a lot.
I understand that. Anyway, that's fine. There's always a way out. We'll definitely have to take the exams anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for doing this with me. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. Um, My name is Alex, and I'm a Genomics STP, based in Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. I am a first year STP and I started last September. Yeah, and before doing the STP, I was working at Qiagen as a scientist. So it's a bit of a change, but I'm really glad that I'm doing this.
Yeah. So when you say you were working as a scientist and it's a bit of a change now, so what's the major difference? What type of scientist were you before now?
So I was working in a team that is called Lifecycle Management, and as part of that team, I was planning and leading and executing investigations around PCR-based assays in the oncology field. So that's something that might interest you as a cancer genomics
Yeah, I
STP.
know, right?
Yeah, yeah. We actually have a lecture about something related to what I was working. There's one about um companion diagnostics. I think there's a lecture about that, and it's exactly what I was kind of working on, even though more from like the investigation commercial side.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So, how are you finding getting used to the NHS type of lab?
Yeah, I think it's based on my experience. I think that like Kaijin was a bit more strict, and there was a lot more of people observing what you were doing. I think it's quite general, as a general, like something that you feel when you work for a company
Mhm.
generally. I feel like I think it does depend from like hospital to hospital, but in my case, people have been quite supportive and not yeah, I haven't felt too stressed because of the staff. I think the staff have been really good so far. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, for your first year rotations, have you completed all your rotations now?
Finishing my third rotation. So we've got four rotations. I've done the genomics rotation first, and
Mhm.
then I did the bioinformatics rotation. So now I'm doing the cancer genomics rotation, and at the end of May, I think I'll start the genomic counseling rotation.
Okay. That's really nice. So, what about your academic background? Do you have a master's, a PhD? What did you do your first degree in?
Yeah. So yeah, starting from like my first degree, so I'm originally from Italy, but I moved to the UK to do my undergrad at Coventry University, and I did human biosciences then, and I did an internship over the summer between the second and the third year at Great Ormond Street Institute of Child Health. So that was quite interesting. And from that, I kind of had like, that's when I think that my passion in genetics kind of developed. And then I wanted to do a master's in genetics just to build up on my knowledge about the field because my undergrad was quite broad.
Mhm.
And I did a master's at UCL in genetics of human disease. I
Mhm.
specialized in inherited diseases on my master's, so that was an option that you could have. And then after that, I started my PhD just 2 days after I finished my master's. Then, so my PhD, obviously there was COVID in the middle
Mhm.
of my PhD, so it was a bit longer than expected. So it lasted about 4 years, and from the from the last year of my research, after there was COVID and we kind of go back to the lab, I was working in a COVID lab. It was an NHS lab. I was working for Public Health England, that now it's called UK Health Security Agency.
Yeah, yeah.
And basically, yeah, they were looking for people in the beginning. They were looking for people who were doing their PhDs to help.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so it was very hectic, and I was doing that over the weekend. Um, and then during the week I was doing my research, and in the weekend I was doing my co-ed job, so it's quite tough. And then when my research period was finished, then I had a year to write up my thesis, and I at that point I was working full time. First, I was working full time in the same lab where I was doing before I was doing like 0 hour contract, and then I became full time, and then I moved to Kyogen. So yeah, basically I was already in a job, in a full time job when I finished my PhD. Yeah, and then I worked a bit more, and then I went to the STP.
That sounds really interesting because I know that genomics is more of inherited disease, rare diseases. So since you've mentioned that you did something about rare and inherited disease, that means it wasn't difficult making up your mind about what STP specialty to apply for.
Yeah, I felt that it was normal progression. I felt like that's always been like my field in a way,
Mhm.
because yeah, like I did the internship, the master's, the PhD, and it was all like on rare diseases. So um that was always what I wanted to work on. And when I was working in the company, even though I learned a lot of important skills that I'm using nowadays, I didn't feel like I was working on the field I studied for. So now I feel a bit more fulfilled in that
Fulfilled,
sense.
yeah. Yeah, I understand that. So I know that your job was in Manchester and you're currently training in London. So how did you choose that location? Did you really want to go back to London, or what made you to, how did you pick your location?
Yeah, so Great Ormond Street was my first choice. Uh, and then I think Manchester was probably second or third. So I knew that if I hadn't been like Great Ormond Street, it would have probably be Manchester. I think that I had already a connection with the hospital in some way. So I was aware of the name and like the fame around the hospital. So I was like everyone, it's applying for the STP is a bit like winning the lottery, really. So I felt like if I have to win this, I have to go big, it's kind
Yeah.
of go big or go home. And so that was my rationale. So yeah, and I think it paid off. Then London is a place that I always felt like I wanted to come back to. I think it's a place that you either like or you don't.
Mhm.
Yeah, but yeah, I think I really enjoy being here. It's a different feel. Um, I feel more connected with people in a way,
Uh-huh.
strangely enough. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. For me, I didn't want to go to London at all, so I preferred being around the Midlands. So that's really nice. So let's talk about your application experience. So getting into the STP, was it your first application?
No. So you mean if I applied before?
Yeah.
Uh, yes, I applied in 2021 when I was doing my PhD. So I
Uh-huh.
hadn't finished that yet, and I applied, so I didn't get in. To be honest, I can't remember at what stage I got. I did do the same test, like the
In
situational
situational
aptitude test,
advantage. Yeah, yeah.
but I can't. I would like to say because I can't remember, but I think I passed the threshold, but then I didn't get invited to for an interview.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was yeah.
Okay. Then, what was your application experience? I know the process is quite long, and
Yeah,
how did you manage
I
that?
yeah, I think it paid off that I had already done it because I had already done the application because I had the notes and what I had submitted then.
Mhm.
So I used that to kind of guide me a bit, and then I kind of updated it, and I think after it was like for 3 years, 3 4 years, you kind of see in in a different way. So I was able to look at some things that I didn't like and change them, and then obviously the things that I would talk about like 4 or 5 years ago would be different
Will
from
be
what I talk
different. Yeah,
about
of
later
course.
because things have changed and I've done more things, and yeah. Yeah, so I think that was good. And also at the time I was applying for a lot of jobs and doing a lot of interviews. So I was already in that kind of mindset of looking for a job. And I think if you have experience in looking for jobs, it helps with looking for any job, but also the STP. If you're kind of used to thinking about what keywords you have to write
Yeah.
and structuring the application in a concise way.
Way.
I think if you do that a lot, if you got a bit of exercise, then that helps.
Yeah.
And also at the interview stage, I felt like that was very helpful. So for the test, yeah, I think I know you got a video on your channel on you know how you help with how would your advice on preparing for the test. But I think a lot of people would tell me that there was no way to really prepare for the test because it's not a knowledge based test, so there isn't
Yeah.
like a book that you can read. It's more about, but I think what helped me was some advice I got about looking at the NHS values and try to apply the NHS values when answering those
Answering the
questions.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's more about what the perfect NHS employee would do as opposed to what you would do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I completely understand that. So you're not answering based on what you think is right, is what the
Yeah,
NHS expects from you.
yeah. It's not how you would react personally. Because we kind of react differently in different situations, but
Yeah,
you kind of
yeah.
have to like take that to one side and like answer in a more objective way. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Then what about your interview? How did you prepare for your interview then?
So again, I had a lot of things, a lot of notes written down on how to answer basic interview questions. I think having some real life examples helps when you're kind of answering the questions. You give some examples of things that you've experienced, and also looking at the NHS values. I think so that definitely helps. Yeah. There are certain things about quality as well that would be that I know that were important for the interview. Yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think you did because of course everyone would approach the interview differently considering your wealth of experience. For people that have done a PhD, you have the perfect research experience. That's how I see it. And of course you're very familiar with rare and inherited diseases. So of course the genomic type of interview question wouldn't throw you off balance anyway. So I you answered the question. Then
Well, yeah, sorry to cut you off. I think what I would say, like the main message about interviews would be that I didn't feel that my experience, my specialist experience really like helped so much. It's more about how you answer those questions because there are some things that like I said that I didn't know, and I would just say how I would find that information instead of saying the right answer,
yeah.
basically. So I
Okay.
think it's really about uh, how you kind of structure your answer and the way you answer more than what you say
Yeah.
that is important.
They always stress that the STP is a training program, of course, so they are not expecting you to be an expert. So sometimes I believe it's not about getting the right answer, it's also about assessing your line of thought as well. So that makes sense with what you just said about. how you approach it rather than just the answer directly. Anyway, that's it about the interview. So thank you. And now that you are a trainee, while on rotation, I don't know if you also get time to maybe get back to your department before you start another rotation. So what's your day to day like? What's a day in your life as a trainee right now like?
So I would say that most of the time is spent at the desk in an office. So um because I feel like for other specialism, that's not the case, that people stay in the lab a lot, especially those that were working in the same lab before getting into the STP. Some of them, they kind of had previous roles that were more lab focused, and they're kind of being asked to stay in the lab a bit more, even as they're doing the STP. So in my case, it was more, and also because of the way it's structured, we stay at the desk and we kind of have a lot of meetings and observations. And I think the two words kind of get mixed a lot. So it's kind of, you have the different trainers that are basically members of staff working in the department who would tell you um either what their job looks like, they can show you what a day in their shoes can look like, or they can have presentations that they already prepared, or presentation slides that other people gave them and they're just presenting them. So you're there and you kind of listen to that and then you ask questions and you take notes. So that can be um, I would say that's probably some of the main activities that we've done, that I've
Yeah.
done. Yeah. Then when there are like dead times, then I would do the work on the train activities basically. I feel there's never enough time for doing those. There's because I feel like I I don't have a switch in my brain that just makes me, write things down. Like I feel like I have to think about stuff and maybe look into certain things that I want to write about. So it takes a while, and then if you're distracted by something else, and then you kind of go back to it, it kind of you have to get back to what you were writing, and so it can take some time to get training activities done.
Yeah, I also find that experience very similar because when you look at the training activity, it seems like, oh, I'll just get it done. It's not a lot, but
Mhm.
when you actually sit down to do it, for instance, some of my rotation gets me into the lab and I've observed this procedure, but when I want to write about it, I kind of like sit down and I find myself for hours trying to like how to structure it, put it together. So when you're at your desk, it makes you to spend a lot of time there. So of course, now that we are in first year, it's majorly around you observe something, you write about it. So maybe when we get to second year and third year, we'll get to do more hands-on stuff. And talking about your specialty, genomics, I know cancer genomics and genomics are quite similar in some things, but can you just talk us through briefly what genomics is about?
Yeah, sure. So as I specialize, the genomics pathway basically focuses on inherited diseases. In fact, I work at a pediatric hospital where this specialism can be offered from year one to year three, which is not the case for cancer genomics, for example. Uh, because I know that they don't offer it anymore. I think they tried and they had to move to a different hospital because they don't see enough of the adult
Cancer cases,
cases.
yeah,
Because a lot of the cancer is mostly like
in adults.
adults. So
Yeah,
yeah, so it would be yeah, working in a pediatric hospital would be the right fit for a scientist who qualifies in genomics.
genomics.
There's a lot of similarities with cancer genomics. Generally, you follow as a rare disease scientist or inherited disease scientist, you follow the specific guidelines from the ACGS for rare diseases.
Rare diseases.
So the way you kind of do variant classification and analysis is a bit different. Or we have the cytogenetics team as well, who work on constitutional karyotyping and macroarray and these kind of techniques. And the way they do karyotype is very different for rare disease or inherited disease case than for a cancer case. Normally, a karyotype in constitutional cytogenetics is much more like the quality needs to be really good because the there's a lot more detail in the rearrangements, in the way they are reported and things like that. So it's a different focus, yeah, compared to cancer.
That's it. But about the diseases, what are the main diseases you guys look at?
So it's we have different teams within the department. But they each of these teams they kind of focus on different groups of diseases, let's say. So you have the core team that would basically look at some of the diseases that are part of the national screening program. I'm still training, so don't quote
I
me on
know.
everything that I'm
I
gonna say.
know.
So like cystic fibrosis and yeah, so that would be like definitely a condition that is analyzed by the core team,
Yeah.
and so they probably get a lot of cystic fibrosis like
Yeah.
analysis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then because we kind of like newborn babies in the UK, they get screened for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then you may have so the cytogenetics team, that's kind of a team on its own, and they focus on the reasons for referral to cytogenetics may be a global developmental delay, or if it's for more like adult cases, it will be unexplained infertility. And sometimes they may be like because it's a pediatric hospital, you can have like some cases that are linked to adult fertility, even though it's not
Mm-hmm.
like a pediatric case. Yeah, so these are kind of cytogenetics. Then you have the specialist teams. Specialist teams, again, most times would be inherited conditions, but they can be more focused in the type of yeah, what kind of conditions they are and how rare they are as well. So you may have metabolic scientists that they only focus on metabolic conditions.
Mm-hmm.
You can have hearing loss scientists, they only focus on like inherited hearing loss, syndromic, non-syndromic, and so on. So you
Yeah.
have
That
different,
that sounds like you guys have different team focusing on very specific diseases.
yeah.
So does that mean in your second year also you're going to rotate through all the teams or something? How will that work for you then?
I think it's possible. So we've already um shadowed some of these scientists
Scientists.
from all the different teams because we have specialist modules that focus on neonatal, pediatric, and adult genomics. So we're probably gonna go through like a lot of different cases, and we're gonna work with different teams. We also have the cancer team,
Mm-hmm.
which is specialized in children.
Children cancer.
So at Great Ormond Street, there's a lot of focus on ALL. So we have BALL, TALL, and
Mm-hmm.
those are like they're not majorly for children, but there's a significant number of cases who have.
Yeah, having those type of cancers.
Yeah, yeah. So we do have teams like a cancer genomics team, and you have. So I learned that if you do the genomics specialism, you can work in a cancer genomics setting, both like in with children and with adults.
Mm-hmm.
So I could potentially work as a cancer genomics scientist in
Yeah, I think I once looked at the curriculum for you guys. So, because you guys get to look at some cancer cases as well as the rare diseases you've talked about. But for us, we focus on just cancers
yeah.
completely.
Yeah, so I'm expected to do a long rotation in cancer on my third year, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm gonna go to Royal Marsden Hospital, which is a specialist. I don't know if it's a specialist hospital, but they kind of get a lot of the burden of cancer testing for both for adults and for children. So actually, because we are all interconnected, we do the extraction of pediatric cases, but then we send the DNA to them for NGS panels, and then they have their own bioinformatics pipelines that they apply, yeah, and then they also apply our Gosh panels, virtual panels on the NGS data that they've sequenced. And then what you have is the data goes back to us. And so then for the pediatric cases, the cancer genomic scientists at Gosh would do the analysis and reporting. So yeah, we're kind of linked in that way.
So for the scientists in your hospital or in your trust, what would you say is their day-to-day role? Because I know that most times their role is usually misinterpreted. So what would you say is the role of a clinical scientist in genomics?
So I think that the genomics clinical scientists basically they have different duties throughout. Like they divide themselves into like I think rotations and stuff. So you'd have the scientist that is acting as duty scientist. So on that day they kind of looking at all the outstanding cases that need to be sometimes they need to be triaged. Sometimes there will be some queries that will need to be answered. And then you have like depending on the team where you are, that you're looking at, you would have a specific kind of task, I would imagine, where you kind of, let's say, if you're in a specialist team, then you would do a lot of the variant classification from the NGS data. You kind of, yeah, and then once you've done that, there's also the reporting of that data. Then a scientist might also be involved in, well, definitely. So all reports need to be second checked. You may have scientists that will second check a report depending on the complexity of the test. So if it's uh yeah, again, don't quote me on that, but basically if it's like a very complex test, you will need like a senior scientist to second
To
check.
look at it again.
There are some reports for simple tests that are drafted by technologists and then they would be second checked by scientists.
Scientists.
You always need a second check.
Second check. Yeah.
And even if it's a senior scientist drafting a report, they will still need another scientist second checking. Yeah, and then well, again, yeah, it varies a lot depending on the team that you're in. That's
Yeah.
what I've learned. So I think that once you kind of find a job, you qualify, you find a job, whatever job that is, um, that's gonna be what you kind of focus on.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. So if you are going to be interpreting NGS data, or if you are going to be more on the cytogenetics part and
Yeah,
based on that, that's what you'll be interpreting as well as reporting back to the clinicians.
yeah, yeah.
What about do they get to attend MDTs as well in your trust?
Yeah, of course. So we have MDTs for so many different things. And also we have, so I know that in genomics we have translational team. Translational team, it's a team which is a bit different from the other clinical teams because they don't have only qualified clinical scientists, but they can also have PhD students and postdocs
Mm,
and they kind of they will work on projects. So the patients that go through the NHS, they might get recruited on some of these projects. And
mm,
then the aim of these projects would be to implement a type of technique or maybe a rapid way of doing a technique that's already been done, see if it can be validated into the clinical setting.
oh yeah.
And then once like if a project is very successful and it gets there's a good way like a good yeah there's good reason to implement certain techniques, then obviously they can be rolled out in different hospitals around the
Yeah.
country as well. There's a project on called Gene Steps, and it's for children with epilepsy, I think, and basically they're doing rapid WGS on those children, and it's helping to identify the diagnosis for a lot of them that maybe was not identified
That's bad.
previously or without in a different way. And also, I think there's a time sensitive situation where the faster you can get a certain result, the earlier you can provide certain treatment, or you can kind of implement some, yes, clinical decisions that can help those children during their development.
Well, that would be the research side of being a clinical scientist, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, wow. I've learned a lot on this call now about genomics, some part because yeah, I've learned something new now about the translational research. Okay, so if you have an advice for someone, if you have one advice for someone coming into the STP, what advice would that be?
If you mean for someone that's already started?
Yeah, okay, let's say for someone aspiring to get into the STP, okay, let's put it in two parts. If you have an advice for someone that gets successful coming into the STP, or an advice for people that are applying to the STP, yeah, so what would that be?
Yeah. So for someone that has already got an offer and are gonna go into the STP, I would say make the most out of the opportunity. There's a lot of things that I have been able to do, like going to conferences and things. You kind of like, yeah, so there are a lot of opportunities out there and you can get a lot of exposure.
Yeah,
Um, but you need to be very strategic and not being afraid to ask.
yeah,
So especially because we do have like a bit of money from the training budget,
mm,
spending that money strategically can really enhance your experience as an STP trainee. So yeah, so I think that would be my, advice.
advice.
And then for someone that would like to apply for an STP, I would say go for it. So obviously, if you feel like this is what you want to do, and well, the minimum requirement is an undergraduate degree. If you've done that, you feel like you want to apply, it doesn't matter that uh, there are people with multiple degrees that apply. As long as you have an undergraduate degree, you should apply. I have known people who were successful in getting an offer with just after the undergraduate degree. Sometimes it might be helpful if you've only done your university time to get a bit of work experience in an NHS lab as
Mhm.
a medical laboratory assistant. That can be helpful because it can give you some insight into whether you like the environment and whether you want to focus on the clinical scientist path, or if you want to work in other roles within the lab, like a biomedical scientist, if that's so. There are different routes that you can take, and so I think having that exposure is helpful. And I think if you've done a bit of work experience in that environment, it's also helpful to be successful in getting into the STP at application level, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's a very that's a great advice, because coming into the lab, I struggled initially. I struggled with imposter syndrome, as well as struggling with getting used to the lab, and the load of information, new things to learn. It was a lot. So I think if I had a lab experience, like a medical lab assistant before then, I think I would have had a different experience. So thank you very much for that advice. I really like that one. Thank you so much, Alex. It's
Thank
been
you.
fun speaking with you again, and after
Likewise.
seeing you in Manchester. So thank
Yeah.
you for doing this with me. Thank you for the advice. I really appreciate it.